Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Captain Logan Show. I am Captain Logan, and here is my illustrious producer, Danny Nixon.
Greetings, everybody.
Danny, kind of a sad week, of course, for the comic book world. We lost Stan Lee on Monday, and I wanted to do a Stan Lee celebration show. So everybody this evening, feel free to ask things that are Stan Lee related. Feel free to ask things that are Marvel Comics related. We can do a little bit of movie stuff here and there if you want to, but we will also take questions about anything and everything that you might want to talk about tonight. So I suspect this will be a mostly Stan Lee heavy show, but in case we in case we get through some of that stuff very quickly, and there's a lot of other things people want to talk about, feel free and ask us anything you want to tonight. As always, the super chat is open if you want to make sure that your question gets read and that I talk about it. Feel free to give us a small donation, and we will make sure and get that in here, and we sure appreciate your support, everybody. Let's go ahead and just jump right into it, Danny. So I did a video years ago. I don't know if you ever saw it. Called Captain Logan's Nightmare, where I was. Do you know about this, Danny?
It sounds familiar. Before I started helping with the channel, obviously I was a big fan of the channel and watched pretty much everything kind of religiously. So I'm sure I've seen the video and it's just not immediately coming to mind.
I did a video where the night before. Well, yeah, I don't expect anybody to watch everything, Danny. I just wondered if you knew what I was talking about.
Sharknado, I watch everything.
I'll get him into Star Trek eventually. By the way, hi everybody in the comments. Everybody watching live right now, and thanks for watching this after the fact if you're doing that. I see a bunch of folks right now. Blue Dragon 5's here, Daniel Davis, Jake Vader 93, Mario 500 now, Anime 2018, Solar Dragon. Good to see everybody. How's it going? Anyway, so I made a video years ago. I don't remember when, 2013, 2014, called Captain Logan's Nightmare, and I had a dream that Stan Lee died. And when I woke up that morning, it was one of those dreams that was really vivid and I thought had really happened. And when I woke up, I really thought Stan Lee was dead for a few minutes. And it was just a really strange, surreal experience. And in a way, ever since then, I've been kind of prepared for this to happen. Like, it didn't hit me the way at that point in time it would have. And Stan Lee, of course, is a big hero of mine, big inspiration of mine. And he's right up there with people like Fred Rogers for people that I really look up to. And obviously, and not to speak ill of the dead, not a perfect person, had his flaws, but I always really admired his work ethic. I always really admired his imagination and his thoughtfulness in the way he told morality stories. So like Stan Lee always wrote stories that had a message and were about trying to drive some kind of a point home. And yeah, you could describe many of them as preachy and on the nose and kind of, obvious in your face sometimes, but they were always self-aware about it. They were those kinds of stories. And again, he was always really thoughtful about it. And so, you hear people all the time who grew up with Spider-Man and other Stan Lee creations who talk about how he kind of helped to shape their morality. And I think he was, of course, a really positive force for a lot of children who grew up. And maybe the concept of just the basic concept of if you have, great ability, you're going to have to be careful with how you use it, might have been a thing that didn't hit them, but resonated with them because that they hadn't thought of yet, like a parent or a teacher hadn't said to them yet, but resonated with them because they had experienced it, or after they read that, they start to see that everywhere, actions and consequences. And of course, also always loved the Marvel Universe at large for its living and breathing continuity. And I always say that Stan Lee, that my favorite Marvel character is the universe. Like I love Spider-Man, I love Daredevil, I love Silver Surfer. But when people ask me, Captain Logan, what's your favorite thing, Marvel or DC? My answer has always been Batman. And for Marvel, so for DC, it's about that one character. I mean, I love other characters in DC, but the main thing I gravitated toward was one character. For Marvel, it was that world, and it's very difficult to put anybody right at the very top because of how tight-knit that continuity was and how interesting that world was. And that's what Stan Lee gave me. And I also have always just really admired the man's work ethic. I may have said that, and his and the way in which he never really got old until he started having understandable health issues into his mid 90s. But like even into his late 80s, it was hard to imagine that you were looking at an 88, 89-year-old man. And Stan Lee is also the epitome, I think, Danny, of the man who becomes more distinguished with age. When you go back and look at a picture of Stan Lee in his 20s, he's unrecognizable. And even I'm even not as comfortable looking at an interview with Stan Lee from like the 70s as I am into the 90s and 2000s, because he just doesn't look like the way I think of him. And I think he gets more distinguished as he gets older. Stan Lee is more of, and he always said that he was like easily caricatured. He's more like that as he gets older. I think he looks his best when he's like 85.
Yeah, like going back to like the 70s or so, where he's got like the salt and pepper hair and he's still got some gray on top. And he's still got the mustache, obviously. It doesn't look like Stan Lee to me, because I've always seen him from like 2000 on, where he's, white hair. It's kind of, I don't want to say unsettling, but kind of unsettling going back and seeing a young Stan Lee. It's just, I've always pictured him as like the kind of the Stan Lee that we've seen for the past, I guess, 20 years now, since he's been like regularly doing the movie cameos. And I think seeing him on the big screen is part of why I have that vision, why it's so hard to kind of see, I guess, Stan Lee in his prime would be a way to describe it.
Yeah.
Although I guess you could say the past 20 years has been his prime, just with how much work he's done in cameos.
Well, at least for popularity, absolutely. Yeah. Once the Marvel movies get big, that's when the whole universe comes to know who he is and like him as a personality and a persona. I was watching a documentary earlier today, Danny, that I'd never seen before, which is, I'll send you a link to it. It is absolutely surreal. It's 1996, and it's a 45-minute documentary that I guess was televised. I don't know where. I found it on YouTube. I'd never seen it. And there's some really interesting people interviewed, like Harlan Ellison is in that. And it's from 96, so it's of course before any of the Marvel movies, and all of the footage they show when they're showing footage is from cartoon shows. And there are bits in there where he's at conventions and he's on stage and he's talking to an audience of maybe 50 to 100 people. That's with crazy. In folding chairs, some of them empty, like just a completely different time, and kind of hard to imagine that now. And that documentary, of course, is treating him like, the god of the comic book world, as in so many ways, he was for people. But he transcended that and became, I think, unquestionably an A-list personality.
Yeah, at the whatever anyone like may feel about like his writing, you may feel it's antiquated now or kind of outdated or not as good as it was even for the time. Beyond anything he did in comics, I think the work he did as an ambassador for comics, just for decades, literally, is so important, because without him, without his work of like being such a pivotal like figure, like a real life figure of like representing comics, I don't think we'd have comics the way we have it. We certainly wouldn't have like the cultural acceptance for comics that we have if it wasn't for Stan Lee and obviously the butterfly effect of everyone who's been influenced by him in his writing and all the characters he created and co-created. And, not to take anything away from the people he worked with, but obviously, him being that person who was able to, who had the charisma to go out and be that figurehead for comics in general, comics at large as a medium, was, I think, personally, the most important thing he did, because I think comics kind of needed that kind of like Mr. Rogers kind of figure to kind of wipe off some of the stigma it might have from like older generations, seeing it as just the funny books type of thing.
Yeah, and I think part of that happened because, well, partly just because he had that charisma, that was the word I was going to use, and larger-than-life personality, and he wanted to be in the spotlight. He had that ego that would sometimes get him into trouble, but also was kind of necessary in order to accomplish that. And I think it happened because of his desperation for people to see what he was doing as legitimate. I heard him say a thing, and we'll get to questions here in a minute. I heard him say a thing that I kind of just wanted to put my thoughts out there about how much I cared about the man and his career. But I think it was in that documentary. I heard a quote that I'd never heard before, which is always exciting with Stan Lee, because I've watched so many interviews and so many specials and things with him. He, would regurgitate the same stories a lot, and you'd start to, some of them, wonder just how true they were because he had told them for so many years. You start to remember the way you told the story as opposed to maybe what actually really happened. So there were a few things that I always kind of took with a grain of salt. And I've not read all of this book, but if you read Marvel Comics: The Untold Story, there are some things where Sean Howe in that will come out and say, okay, so here's this thing that you've heard Stan Lee say 1,000 times, and here are the people that say it didn't happen exactly like that. But anyway, he said a thing I never heard before, which I liked a lot, which was people think words and pictures are just silly, funny book material, as you put it, Danny. And if somehow you had Shakespeare and Michelangelo get together and say, and William Shakespeare says, hey, this is the way he put it. Hey, Mike, why don't we sit down together and tell a story? And I'm gonna and you draw the pictures, Marvel Method. You draw the pictures, and I'll fill in the words. No one would say that wasn't art.
Exactly.
That's brilliant. I'd never heard that.
Yeah, and I think that's something everyone who's a comic book fan has kind of felt in their mind, but never been able to quite as well articulate that. You've got great writers, and you've got great artists, and you've got great colorers, and you've got great letterers. Everyone across the board is an artist in their own right, but because of kind of the reputation it's had since I guess the golden age, no one looks at it as art. I don't want to say no one, because certainly that stigma has
and that's
really
changed
gone
a
away.
lot now, of course. Yeah, we teach comics in college now, and yeah, and a lot of some of the best stuff that's being written now, I think, pretty unarguably, is in comics, and then a lot of that stuff, that's where we're mining for really good television shows and stuff. So, that has changed to some degree. There are still plenty of people that are. I do find myself still having to be an apologist for comics sometimes. You still do have those folks out there. But yeah, I don't think you could find me really anybody in the art world or the literary world that would disagree with that once they heard it.
No, because, granted, that may have something to do with the passage of time, and we've looked at these people as, as great artists from a different era. And who knows, maybe 100 years from now, people will look at Stan Lee in the same way they look at Shakespeare or someone. Not saying that it's going to happen with Stan
Not
Lee
the same way, no.
But seeing them as a pioneer of because
you're right, Shakespeare didn't get antiquated over time, and there are things about Stan Lee's style that it admittedly most certainly have. Yeah. Jake Vader, speaking to that, Jake Vader 93, says, is he implying that he's Shakespeare level of skill? No, that's not what he's saying. I don't think that wasn't when he said that. It wasn't him comparing himself to anyone. It was him trying to justify comics as an art form.
Yeah, and I think that kind of just how you said it, it kind of sounds like him saying, look, even if you had two people who are seen as the best of their type of art working on this, no one would say it's not art. These are the two greatest of, greatest writer, greatest artist as far as history goes.
That's how you validate it. Yeah. If you could get two people of that caliber. Now, the easy argument, these kinds of things always break down somewhere. Not to talk about this too much. The easy argument against that is to say, well, one of these guys wasn't a storyteller. But if he was, But even, you know what, I say that's not true. Michelangelo was a storyteller. When you look at when you look at a lot of his work, not that I'm big into classic art or anything, but you know, you look at murals and ceilings and stuff, and there's a whole mythology of things going on, right?
Yeah, you could even look at like a singular piece. It's like one focal character. Like, just because it's not like sequential art, or there's not like a very obvious like expressive motion in it, you know, like someone reaching out to grab an apple or someone reaching out to do the, even if it's just someone standing, there's still a story being told in like the way expression is drawn on the face, you know, posture, if like the shoulders are back or if they're slunched over, that's still art. It's still telling a story.
He's expressing some kind of truth about people and the human condition with actions that people are taking. Benjamin Fenty, and I know we've got other super chats, but I might as well mention this one now. Sends the $10 super chat and says Excelsior. Probably a good idea to get that in here someplace. Yeah, thanks, man.
I appreciate that. I was gonna like end the show off and saying Excelsior, true believers, but
yeah, I was gonna wait to the end, but we, you know, just in case we forgot it, there it is. Before we finally start getting to questions, I just wanted to mention a couple things, show off a couple of things. Danny, I regrettably never got to meet Stan Lee in person. And I was at a comic show he was at and didn't stand in line. And I do regret that to a degree. I will say, in my defense, that was $100 autograph. And I already have his autograph, even though I've not met him before, which I'll show you in a second. And I would love to have I would certainly spend $100 to get to talk to Stan Lee for any amount of time. But I've seen a lot of video of people being rushed through his lines, and especially as that was one of the last cons he did. And especially at that time, with as tired and haggard as he looked when he was trying to sign autographs, he might not even really look up at you. And like I wouldn't really get to meet him. I wouldn't really get to shake his hand. I think he was doing photographs at some point during the day, and maybe I would have done that. Dan Torrey did that. And I'm really glad Dan got to meet him, being the biggest Spider-Man fan on the planet. But I somewhat regret that, but I will say I wish I'd done it like 10 or 15 years earlier. That's the thing I more regret, is that I had flown someplace when he was when he was you know, in better health and sprier, and I might have gotten to say 5 words to him. That I would have certainly paid for.
Yeah, I've never been,
but that was going to be 3 hours out of my day at a convention I was doing things at, and so that's why I didn't. It's funny, I'm kind of apologizing to everyone for not meeting Stan Lee, but like, so like to a degree, in a way, I regret it, but it's more that I regret that I didn't go 10 or 15 years before that.
Yeah, I've never had the opportunity to go to a con he was at. Ideally, even like 5 years ago, I feel like he still would have been in good enough health and spirits that he would have still been interacting more with the fans. Like lately, for the past 2, I guess since his wife had died, you'd hear all the reports from cons about when you go and take a picture, you have to stand beside him. You can't put your arm over him or anything because of, you know, his health is just,
and Dan did
to that point. Yeah. So it's one of those things where I don't feel bad that I never got an autograph of his, because as morbid and as probably crass as this is to say, eBay is going to be flooded with them more than it has been for the past however many years. And it's not going to be hard to find a Stan Lee autograph if I ever want to pick one of those.
Yeah, but now that he's passed on, I'm sure it will be worth a little more.
I'm sure it will, but there's so many out there, it's probably not going to go up super high. I say that, watch it go up to like $1 million.
No, it won't. So here's the autograph I have, and this is definitely real. This is from 1994, the year that the animated series started, and I've shown this on camera before, but for folks that haven't seen it, this was a limited edition print of obviously the Doc Ock and Spider-Man from that show that he signed on television, if memory serves. This was the story I heard about this. My dad bought this in the maybe only a couple years after that, like 96, 97, it came through his flea market, and it's got the certificate of authenticity and everything. I buy that this is real. And I looked into this a little bit years ago to see how many of these there were, and because I don't think this certificate even actually says. But anyway, he was on some kind of TV special signing these, and so I think there's only like a few thousand of them, maybe fewer than that. I'm not sure. But this is the first signature I ever got, Danny. And it's one of the first pieces of memorabilia outside of comics and action figures I ever owned. And I think I got this shortly after or around the same time as I got my first comic book that goes back that far, which is Fantastic Four number 20, which is not in great shape, admittedly. But this is the first really collectible comic I ever owned, and probably the first thing I ever had that Stan Lee wrote. But so this was Fantastic Four number 20. This would have been 1963, and this was a 12-cent book. And I have always liked Molecule Man because of this. And Molecule Man is featured pretty majorly in Secret Wars, which really excited me that they brought him back and made a big deal out of him. But anyway, so those are some things I wanted to show you real quick. We have a bunch of super chats, so let's go ahead, Danny, and I'm sorry for the long opening here, but I decided to do the Stan Lee tribute thing here live for everybody instead of making a separate video. So kind of got that out, and now we can talk to you guys a little bit further about Stan Lee. That went longer than I thought it was going to, but I guess I had a lot to say. Danny,
if anyone deserves the long introduction, it's definitely Stan Lee.
So I hope nobody minded that. Anyway, Danny, why don't we go ahead and do a couple super chats, and then we'll do a pre-written so that we don't shaft the pre-written folks. Go ahead.
All right. The first super chat from Thomas Edgehill. He says, if a Stan Lee biopic is made, who should play him?
That's a great question. As everyone knows, I suck at fan casting. I'm gonna go for the obvious choice. Oh man, why are names not coming to me? It's the guy from Whiplash. Who played J. Jonah Jameson, right? Like,
oh, that'd be perfect. Yeah, I know. Like, I'm blanking on his name.
That's who it is, though, right? At least for older Stan Lee, and then you find like a younger guy to play him in the past, unless you're just telling like a story about him later. Depending on how you do it. Like if you have an older Stan Lee, you'd use him. I don't know who a good young maybe J.K. Thank you. Maybe Sam Hamm. But even he might be a little bit too old to play a really young Stan Lee at this point. Well, maybe not, though, because, and this is the thing I meant to say earlier, too. One of the things that's also really interesting about Stan Lee is that I think the big lesson to learn from Stan Lee's life is that life is not over at 40. Because he thought he was about done with comics, at least the way he tells it, and wanted to get out. And he was 40 before Marvel even happened. I'm 34 right now, and sometimes worry that I've not accomplished enough in my life. And you're talking about a guy who obviously had accomplished things at that point, but everything he's known for happens after 40.
Yeah, but after 60 is when most people. After he's 60 is when most people are like introduced to him. Certainly. But I mean that like his major accomplishments were just around 40, you know, inventing all of those characters.
Wow, we're getting a lot of super chats, so let's get rolling. Go ahead and throw another one out.
All right, he had multiple questions in there, so I'm going to get to
sure. Part. We'll just knock those out.
How are Jason and Eric taking the news, and who at Marvel do you think will fill the void left by him?
It's funny because Jason, I realized I was skimming comments today on the post I put out about Stan Lee, and I want to thank my buddy Brandon because he sent me the news about 10 minutes after it dropped, and I had not heard yet, and I posted it on Facebook very quickly, and so I think quite a few people who saw it on Geekvolution or on the Facebook, maybe that's how they found out about it. So we had a lot of comments where people were giving their immediate reactions to it, and so thanks to Brandon for letting me know about it as quickly as he did. I was skimming that, and somebody asked that Danny. They were like, "Oh, how does Jason feel about it?" And I hadn't looked at those comments, and that was 3 days ago. And I realized I don't think I told him about it. And so I went over to Jason, and I was, and of course, Jason loves Stan Lee, and I was real careful about it. I was like, Jason, did you hear the news about Stan Lee? He goes, yeah, Mom told me about it already. And so I don't know how he took it when he knew about it, but I think he's probably heard me and Eric or me and someone else talk a little bit about, Stanley's getting up there. Obviously, he's not going to live forever. Kind of wondering, especially, and again, not to be morbid about it, but I think a lot of us wondered how long Stan Lee would outlive his wife, because it's very common for elderly people who have, elderly couples who have been together forever, 30, 40, 50 years, to die very close to each other. Yeah. Because once their significant other is passed, like that's the thing they were really holding on to. And so I think a lot of us were again pretty mentally prepared for this, and that's not to say that it's not sad, but of course he lived a super long life, and everybody ultimately passes away, and I'm glad that it was pretty much old age and not a horrible thing that he had to go through, as far as I understand it. But anyway, but yeah. Eric has exactly what I have, which is I thought I'd be devastated, but I just had given it so much thought that I was kind of mentally prepared for it.
Yeah, I've kind of gone through that same thing where like 3 or 4 years ago, this probably would have hit me a lot harder when I was still kind of fresh and getting into some more, diving deeper into comics of what is normally my wheelhouse, right? But now it's kind of a thing where I look at it more of he was 95, he accomplished so much. He had, by all accounts, did exactly what he wanted to do with his life, it seemed. He lived a very fulfilling life. So it's more of not an at peace, because I obviously didn't know the guy, but it's more like, I'm glad it's more about celebrating the life he did have than mourning that at 95 he passed away, because, when you lived to 95 like Stanley and you accomplished as much as Stanley, you've kind of won the game of life at that point.
And I think a lot of fans weren't ready for it and wouldn't have been no matter when it happened. He could have been 105 because again, for in a lot of ways, he was a man who refused to get old, and I think people were just used to the immortal Stan Lee who outlives everyone. And what does the world look like without him? I think that is the big thing for me, where it is kind of hard to imagine the world without him in it.
Yeah,
I certainly have that. Not to be sappy or anything, but I do kind of have that. Where it's just like there are other folks that have died where I've had that, but the Stan Lee probably is the biggest. Where it's like, just kind of hard to imagine. Let's knock out some more of these super chats.
All right, the next one from Jake Vader 93. Do you believe that Stan Lee deserves the vitriol he gets from certain comic book fans about not giving enough credit to other creators like he should?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks a lot. And I figured some things like this would come up. Obviously, I want to celebrate the man tonight, and I don't want to, like at the risk of speaking ill of the dead, I certainly will talk about this. It being, a show where we're talking about the man. But as I said earlier, like, no, he wasn't perfect. There was an ego. There was a he to some degree had I think sometimes maybe for people like a William Shatner thing. I feel like I have a hard time like having the vitriol about it myself, because I wasn't there, and it's like, different people's stories, and it was, a million years ago, and I'm not saying that there's not truth to it. There certainly definitely is. But I don't know about you, Danny, I totally get it. Like the notion of the big thing I've heard from people like Jack Kirby is like, the way the Marvel method works is Stan Lee would give you like a quick pitch or an outline, and you would plot the entire thing yourself with pictures, and then he would come in and put in the words. And there are a couple of ways to look at that, because part of the reason they did that was just so that they could get as many books out as they did. And Stan Lee could not have co-created as many characters as he did if he hadn't done it that way. He also was very often would call himself lazy in a jokey way. The complaint is that he was actually really lazy, and that he was kind of like taking credit and money from people through his laziness. And we talk about credit issues with comics all the time, and it's dicey and very difficult to decide who should get credit sometimes with things. But the thing that I would hear from some of the artists that work with Stan Lee, and this is talked about a lot in Marvel, the Untold Story, is that you're not getting paid for plotting. So like Stan Lee plots it, but you actually decide everything that happens just around bullet points. So is that fair? That's kind of dicey. And then also, they don't get credit for story, even though they decide a lot of the major details, even though he gives you the big beats. I see both sides to that. I think that it's that those complaints are absolutely totally valid. I don't have vitriol against the man. I don't think, because he certainly doesn't pretend like he's the only person that created these characters, right? I don't know if he paid them enough. I don't know if on the page he credited them the way that he did. And the only thing I have to go on is comparisons to other creators that did do that. It's not a Bob Kane situation, right?
I was about to say, if we're going on like a scale of like straight up co-credit, you know, sharing everything as evenly and as fairly as you can, to the Bob Kane level of basically taking credit for everything that Bill Finger did.
Who didn't even like to really bring up Bill Finger. You heard Stan Lee talk about Ditko and Gil Kane and all these guys, spoke really highly of them, and always talked about how he couldn't have done what he did without them. That doesn't mean that they necessarily got the credit that they should have, and he seemed to be sometimes very difficult to get along with. I think it was Kirby that by the mid-'60s they were not even speaking.
Yeah, and that was a point I wanted to bring up, is whether Stan made mistakes about fair credit. You know, not going to debate anything about who should have gotten credit, because I don't know enough about the history.
Did I say Kirby? I meant Ditko. He and Ditko didn't get along, partly because of philosophical issues.
Yeah, that seemed to be the big thing. But with Kirby, Stan, in a Kirby documentary, talked about and seemed very remorseful that things ended sourly between those two. And I think above any issues about crediting, that kind of speaks more to the man he was. Like, later in life, he was remorseful of how things went with someone who he worked with and obviously was a friend with at some point. So it's hard.
Maybe he got more mature with age too.
It's very hard to have a vitriol against someone who recognized those mistakes and was remorseful for them, because he's never been one to, I don't want to say never. Everything I've heard from him, he's not shy about giving credit to Kirby or Ditko or anyone else he worked with. Like, obviously he's going to take the lion's share of the credit.
Yeah, and you can debate whether or not he deserves that. But like I'm not saying that he's the most humble person in the world. And again, he wasn't a perfect guy, but he did seem to be a very moral, thoughtful person.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, he made a lot of mistakes, but as you say, I think he felt bad about them. Let's go to a pre-written question and then get back to the super chats. Right. We are just now finally getting into questions, and we've only got 25 minutes left, so we're going to blow through things as much as possible. Go ahead, sir.
All right, from Dimitri 2. Stan Lee always said he used to imagine leaving comics to write a serious novel that never ended up happening. What do you think that book would have been?
That's a great drama. No, I imagine something on more of a cosmic level. I think he would have tried to write. He either would have gone with something. I said cosmic. He would have done one or the other. He would have either. You're right. He would have either done something really literary and street level, and it would have been just about like a road trip, or a guy just like walking across the highway or something, hitchhiking, or great American novel stuff, or it would have been like a Silver Surfer cosmic kind of thing, that would be all about like man's place in the universe and godhood and that kind of thing. I imagine one of those two things from him as a novelist. But yeah, he wanted to. He wanted to be a novelist and was afraid that comics were holding him back from that. And then when he was finally allowed to write comics the way he wanted to, he kind of started thinking of those as his novel. But wished that he had gotten more recognition from adults for that. But that's a great question.
We'll jump to the next question, which multiple people have asked. So I'm not going to credit any one particular person.
Sure. Favorite cameos?
Yeah, I'm going to have my, it's the cameo question. I'm going to have my Stan Lee moment and not give anybody credit. And I'm hitting, obviously. But what is your favorite Stan Lee cameo?
So I knew this was going to come up. So I wrote a top 5. Are you ready? Here we go. Captain Logan's top 5 Stan Lee cameos. Let's see if I can actually, I didn't put them in an order, but I'm even going to try to order them as we go along. Are you ready? This will be like a mini video. I can like take this out of the live show and post it later. Here we go. So my top 5 Stan Lee movie cameos are as follows. I think number 5 is the one from Thor where he's trying to pull out the hammer in the truck. That always cracked me up. I think it's absolutely wonderful. I love that one. My number 4 is Age of Ultron. The Excelsior thing, which is funny because it's also about the Thor hammer, and then where he kind of gets drunk. And and I saw him in an interview where he said that that's his favorite because it cuts and he's in 2 parts. He likes that because he's sort of in 2 scenes, so he got excited about that.
That's such a Stan Lee thing.
Yeah, it is. I know, it's great. My number 3 is Guardians 2. Even though I wish that somehow he was straight up a watcher and not a guy in a spacesuit. I assume he's still a watcher. I don't totally understand that, but I appreciate that they finally did the things fans wanted forever, where they canonicized all of the cameos. And I like the idea that you could even count in all the cameos he did in not MCU movies as part of that. Yeah. If it's a multiverse or something. My number 2 is Amazing Spider-Man with the where he's the librarian and he doesn't hear the fight going on behind him. It's wonderful and it's really, really well shot. And my number 1 is Winter Soldier, where he sees the suit missing and he thinks he's gonna get fired.
Those are all great. I don't know if I've got 5 off the top of my head, but the Amazing Spider-Man one is always one of my favorites. The Watcher one obviously is kind of one of the newer films, one of my favorites, just because that was taking a fan theory that you can do and no one's going to get upset about it, and they actually made it happen. It's not super consequential, so it's not like breaking any kind of continuity. I love that one. I forget which Spider-Man movie it is from the Raimi ones, but it's been posted all over Facebook and Twitter of the, I guess, where he says, I guess one man can change the world.
Yeah.
That one, especially
that one is really good. That's Spider-Man 3, isn't it?
I think so. I just couldn't remember if it was 2 or 3. So, and then,
and then what's the Amazing Spider-Man 2 one?
Sorry about the dog barking. I'm not quite sure.
Maybe that's the one where he says that. I can't remember. Anyway.
And then Mallrats, but that's not like a cameo. That's like an actual full-on scene.
Yeah, and some of the places he shows up get really funny when they have nothing to do with Marvel things. He shows up as a bus driver in Heroes. I don't know if you know about that one.
No, I've never seen Heroes.
That one's pretty cool. And he's got it's obvious but fun. He's got one in the Teen Titans Go movie.
Yeah, they're
trying to make fun of a bunch of tropes, and they're like, "Oh, it's a superhero movie. Stan Lee's got to show up." And it's like, Stan Lee, this isn't even a Marvel movie. What are you doing here? That's pretty great. I also kind of like the big setup they do in the after credits for Big Hero 6. But now that he's passed and we haven't had a sequel to that yet, that makes that kind of awkward.
Kind of going with that, how a couple people have talked about what they want to happen with Stan Lee cameos moving forward. How do you feel about that as far as like continuing cameos in some form or fashion moving forward now?
I mean, I've got no problem, of course, with there's his picture on a milk carton. There's his picture on a poster somewhere. I like the idea of trying to keep it alive in some clever way like that. And we've already done that with things where we didn't actually have him, but you see him on a picture somewhere. One of the Marvel Netflix shows do it. I think it's Jessica Jones. I can't remember.
Daredevil does it in the first season.
Is it Daredevil? Yeah, where he's in. Are we even thinking of the same one? There's one where he is like a cop on a poster.
That's a couple of the Marvel Netflix shows. Like his cameo is he's like a police sergeant or something, and you see his picture in like police stations.
Yeah,
it spans across different series.
I am totally cool with. Daniel Davis says that Stan Lee appears in the Big Hero 6 show. I forgot that got a show. That's cool. So apparently that keeps going. That's great. Anyway. Remember he's that kid's dad. I don't know if you remember that.
Never seen Big Hero 6.
Oh, you should. It's wonderful. But anyway, I like that as a tradition. I'm not gonna have a problem with it if they don't do that. Like every single time, like, well, where's the Stan Lee camp? Yeah, I'm not gonna be looking for it. I don't have to have that. I don't mind that. I don't want any like messing around with CG and somebody doing a voiceover, and I don't want to ever go there. Even in animation, let's not do that. I think that's even if you don't think that it's like really crass or disrespectful or anything. I just don't see the need for it. I don't think we need to force it in. Somebody asked if they thought that he got his cameo into Avengers 4. Almost certainly. We know he shot 6 at one time, and I think only 3 or 4 of those could have possibly come out by now. There's got to be at least 1 or 2 posthumous ones, because we know he was shooting them for movies that hadn't even started filming yet. I think I'm right about that.
Yeah, I think they've already confirmed that the one for Avengers 4 is already done. But I remember years ago.
Principal photography of that was done months ago.
Yeah. I remember someone, maybe James Gunn or someone, talking about like they just brought Stan Lee into a green screen and just filmed a bunch of like random stuff.
Yeah.
Just to have like.
So they could just keep doing it?
Yeah. Just so they could like, because obviously you're not going to call him in every time you need to shoot, Black Panther or Spider-Man Homecoming or whatever
and also he was starting to have health problems, so they wanted to do that while he still could. Because you were talking earlier about how when he was at conventions, toward the end, because remember he stopped going just this last year. He finally announced he wasn't doing anymore, and you were talking about how after his wife passed, he wasn't really the same at conventions. But I think it goes even before that a little bit, because he was almost totally blind, and that had to make signing kind of irritating.
Yeah, didn't he mention he couldn't even read comics anymore because of...
Right. No, he couldn't. No, he was almost... I've seen a couple of interviews where he talks about how he was almost completely blind.
That's kind of heartbreaking. It's someone who dedicated so much time and contributed so much to comics, couldn't even read a medium that he really helped popularize. That's tough.
Yeah, but I'll also say if I make it to 95 and I'm only blind for 2 or 3 years of my life, that's a pretty good run. Like,
yeah, certainly.
I will not feel bad about that. I don't think.
No, especially for someone who's been wearing glasses for as long as they have, because I get to the point where if I don't have my glasses on, I can't read the comments that I'm seeing right now. So Stan Lee was doing better than I was, apparently.
What else have we got, sir? How many super chats do we have?
1.
Is it just overwhelming?
3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Okay, it's time for rapid fire super chats. Go ahead.
All right, the next one from Dave Atkins. Cheers for this special live show tribute.
Thanks, man.
Wish I met the man personally.
Yeah, me too, buddy.
All right, and Super Nerd says, Cap, how much of Stan Lee's written work have you read?
So I have read quite a few, like first or and second, or like really early issues of things that I would find either digitally or like reprints and things. So like Dan Torrey and I were doing the early Spider-Man stuff for a while, and I would really like to get back to that eventually, but Dan had to go off and go to law school and try to become Matt Murdock, so that's not happening right now. But so I've read the first like 12 issues of that. I have read some of early Fantastic Four. I've read some of I've read the first 10 or 12 issues of Daredevil, which I'm thinking about going back to and doing this on the omnibus next time if I have time for it. This is some of my favorite stuff from him. And some people don't like early Daredevil. I mean, yeah, you don't want to compare it too much to what it became later because it's somewhat of a different thing. I really like early Daredevil.
I love that yellow suit.
Actually, I do too. I think it's great, and it still looks really good once it goes to the red. But
yeah, I've never read any Stan Lee. Sadly, people know I'm not much of a Marvel guy, so I've never gone back to read like early Marvel stuff. But I love the look of that yellow suit. Like it doesn't beat out the red suit, obviously, because the red suit I think is just brilliant. But that yellow suit, I love it.
I really like Wally Wood stuff. And of course Everett's good too. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, I don't know. That's some of my favorite Daredevil stuff. I have read the Galactus trilogy, the famous Galactus trilogy, which I have. Here's one of the issues of that. So yeah, I've read some of the major key issues here and there, but never a complete run of anything. So yeah.
Our next super chat from Andrew Follett.
Oh, and Silver Surfer Parable, which I've been meaning to review forever. That graphic novel that he did with Mobius. It's excellent. I think it's one of the best things he ever wrote, certainly, and it's later. I have it on loan right now. I sent Eric a message earlier, and I was like, "Hey, you know what? We should do Parable because we've been talking about that forever." And he was like, "You loan that out to someone. You should get it back first." And I was like, "Oh, I didn't remember that. I need to keep a loan ledger. I did not remember that. So that may happen. But I recommend that highly. It's wonderful."
Captain Logan, Loan Shark.
Loan Shark. Yeah. Anyway, go right ahead.
Andrew Follett says, I was at the last New York Comic-Con Stan was ever at. I jumped up repeatedly to get a glimpse of him over the crowd. I was satisfied with that.
Yeah, sure.
I'd certainly love to have seen him in person.
And yeah, I got a glimpse of him at Planet Comic-Con, but I didn't get to get up close and talk to him at all.
The next question is Mr. Roboto. He says, was that a mint, never opened Fantastic Four?
No. And I mean, and also, not to make fun of anybody or anything, but comics can't really, especially older comics, can't really be like mint and never open because they would be not sold in plastic in the first place. So you have to put them in a bag and board later. But yeah, are we talking about this one? If this be Doomsday, yeah, this is probably a good to very good at best. A copy of this particular comic. A lot of my older stuff like this is not in brilliant shape. When I do manage to get things that are in really, really nice shape, I have to pay quite a bit more for them. And for me, even as a collector, it's kind of exciting just to have a first edition of a thing that is intact and the staples are still there and it's not falling apart. And so, like, yeah, I could just buy things in trade and have them to read. So you might be like, well, like, doesn't it need to be perfect if it's in your collection? No, I just kind of like having it represented. So yeah, I go for the best condition that I can get. But if I can get a thing like that for 30, 40, $50, yeah, do it.
Yeah, they're not mint, but sometimes he uses them as mints.
that was a deep pull reference. Nice.
I'm curious to see how many people catch that one.
Me too. I'm not even gonna tell them what that's from. Hint: we made it. Go ahead, Danny.
If you make it, they will come.
Yeah, no problem, Super Nerd. Absolutely. Hey, why don't you go and do another pre-written real quick before we go back to Super?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got one. Sorry, I'm trying to find it because they're kind of buried at the top of the thing. Blue Dragon 5 says, hey, Cap, have you ever watched the documentary With Great Power, the Stan Lee story?
Yeah, I mean, back when it came out. I don't even immediately remember a lot about it. I think McFarlane was interviewed a lot in that, but I don't know if I'm remembering that correct. Yes, I have seen that. I can't speak to it at all right now, but I remember liking it.
Anime 2018 says, hi, Cap and Danny.
Hi there.
Who is your favorite villain that Stan Lee created?
Galactus. Obviously, easy enough. Yeah, I mean, like my answers, my go-to answers to Marvel things are also going to usually be my answers to Stan Lee things because he made up most of them, right?
Doctor
I
Doom
have this weird interest in Doctor Doom, where I think I like Doctor Doom. Not that I know a ton about Doctor Doom. I think I like that character and just the concept of that character almost more than I like Fantastic Four. But then I guess I have that with a lot of villains with their heroes anyway, because I think I'm more of a Lex Luthor fan than I am a Superman fan in some ways. In some ways.
I was about to say, I've never read a single Fantastic Four comic. I just love Doctor Doom. I love the idea of like a tyrant who like apparently can, when he has his way, apparently everything just goes right, which is like such a cool idea that the person who is evil and really is not the ideal of what a leader should be, still managing to do things right. I think that's such a really interesting idea.
I like bad guys who are almost deserving of the thing they want, even though like you almost want them to get it because they become so likable to you, even though you know that would be bad and not a good thing at all. Kind of that Mojo Jojo thing of, oh, if he ran the world, he'd actually do a good job. Like,
yeah, that's my thing's like, yeah, he's doing a good job, but at what cost? I like that kind of like moral questions asking, like, are you okay with this despite the cost it comes with? And I think that's a really cool idea to explore in comics, especially with the criticism comics get about being like a fascist storytelling medium, at least superheroes. But that's the whole completely different subject.
Jeffrey says mint condition Captain Nixon showed VHS tapes are in the lobby for a limited time.
And they're in those plastic VHS covers, not those cheap paper ones.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm. And they're still shrink wrapped. Nobody ever took them out. They still have the $25.99 sticker.
Oh god.
You think someone actually paid that? It's just overstock. We actually picked it up at a dollar store. They just didn't pick those stickers up.
I went to a local consignment shop last Christmas looking for like stuff to make wreaths with for my girlfriend at the time. So many VHSs were just sitting over there. It was weird. Like there was an X-Men VHS. Like I kind of want to get this just for nostalgia's sake.
I had started collecting superhero VHSs again. Because I have my massive collection of superhero DVDs and Blu-rays, and I've decided to do it with VHS finally. And it's so cheap; it's really easy to do. Like that will be a thing when I amass a whole shelf of that. Nobody will be impressed with that. They'll be like, "Yeah, you spent $1 a piece on these. Who cares?" But I want to have them.
Congrats! You've got an outdated video format that takes up a ton of space.
Good job. How many could there possibly be? 50? I guess so you dropped like what, like a fraction of a paycheck on that. Oh, all right. Good job. Anyway,
cool. You've got Blade and Batman and Robin.
You spent all of your Christmas money on superhero VHS tapes. Good job. Okay, let's go back to the super chats.
All right, Grady Child says, this isn't Stan Lee related, but thoughts on the Detective Pikachu trailer getting more likes, comments, and views than Toy Story 4, and your thoughts on the trailer.
Oh, well, I wasn't really comparing the two trailers. I mean, like, I don't know how fair that is. Like, Toy Story 4 is like I know that there are still a lot of people who love Pixar and everything Pixar and are really looking forward to Toy Story 4. I'm not looking forward to that, but like a live action Pokemon movie is a thing we've never seen before. So it's not surprising at all to me that more people are kind of losing their minds about that. I also think it's possible that a lot of people didn't even know about that Detective Pikachu was happening because we've been talking about it, but I guarantee you there were people that found out about that that were like, wait, what? What is this? So, and also Ryan Reynolds continues to be just really, really hot, right? So that's not surprising to me. The Toy Story 4 teaser is a classic standard Pixar teaser where they show you glimpses of the characters, and in this case, your favorite characters, because it's a franchise that's been going on for a long time, so that you'll be like, oh, yay, these characters. And they do that surreal, on white thing, which I think Toy Story's done quite a bit, which I think kind of goes back to the lamp thing. I think that's part of why they still do that, because, the lamp on white. And it's interesting. I had never considered, are there other inanimate objects in that universe that come to life, and how come we never see them do that? And I don't know what's going on with that spork, and I don't know if that's going to be a real jump the shark moment for that franchise, but I'm intrigued by it most certainly.
Wait, is that the premise? Is that other inanimate objects come to life? Because I haven't seen the trailer.
I don't know. It has a spork with a face that just freaks out, going, "I'm not a toy," and that's what's in it. That's what it is.
I'm not excited.
Look, I don't know what they're doing yet. It's a spork with a face. It's a short teaser. But it was amusing. And then, but Detective Pikachu was more of a straight up trailer. They showed a lot more with that than I thought they would. Danny, I'm hoping it's good. I can't get super excited about it yet. Did you see that trailer?
No, I haven't seen either trailer. I'm not a Pokemon guy.
So Danny's no help at all. So with Detective Pikachu, I can only see Deadpool running around as Pikachu. He's not modulating his voice at all. He's just doing Ryan Reynolds, and it feels weird having a voice that I always associate with really adult humor in a kids movie, just doing the thing he always does, but reeled in. It's going to take some getting used to with that. I like the look of it. Some people don't. Eric, and we'll talk about this on the live show, or the live show. This is the live show. We'll talk about this next week in the Omnibus. Eric says he's not sure about, or just flat out doesn't like that the Pokemon kind of look like stuffed animals. I personally like that aesthetic. I don't have a problem with it.
I like the cutesy look.
It maybe makes a little bit more sense with Christopher Robin, because there's kind of, I want to say a built-in reason that they look like stuffed animals in that. It turns out they're not actually stuffed animals, like Winnie the Pooh. They're not actually stuffed animals in that. So they just look like that because that was always the aesthetic of that, but at least like it calls back to something. So I can see why he would be a little bit turned off to that, but it gives them a texture that makes them look like they're more there, which is what I like about it, because it doesn't look like there are these cartoons running around next to human beings. That texture makes it feel more like they're really there. And also the main kid in that, who's going to be a Pokemon trainer. Oh, and let me also say, I didn't expect that much actual Pokemon stuff, and I didn't expect Pokemon to be in the title. So that's really cool. But the main kid in that, I really disliked in Jurassic House. So I'm hoping I like him better in this, because I really didn't like him in that movie.
Yeah.
So those are my feelings about that.
I've seen a couple like pictures and GIFs from the trailer. I'm so glad they didn't go with that like pseudo realistic look of like, if you see all the like concept art that fans make of like making them look super realistic and super grotesque. I don't want that for Pokemon.
Well, it's funny you say that, because Ciro says Mr. Mime is nightmare fuel.
Okay.
He's pretty freaking scary. And I love Mr. Mime, but but like, I don't know, the Bulbasaurs look like Bulbasaurs and the Snozzberries taste like Snozzberries. So that's good. Somebody else said something I wanted to mention. Oh yeah, this is great. David Crabtree, in 2019, Disney is going to get people to pay $20 for a spork. That's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Okay, so we are already past what the time we usually go. We need to get the super chats knocked out. So how many more do we have? 6 or 7?
1, 2, 3, 4 more.
Oh, good. Okay, all right. Right. Well, we did that faster than I thought we would. Let's knock them down, Danny. Go ahead.
All right, the first one from Mr. Roboto. Marvel now run by a board. How long left for his influence to fade from the movies and from the book and movies? What is your estimate?
So the premise is, at some point, Marvel just won't have any Stan Lee influence left because he's passed. Is that what he's suggesting?
At first, I thought he was talking about Marvel now, but now I'm thinking he's saying Marvel now run by a board, assuming board of directors.
Yeah.
How long left for his influence before it fades from the books? I don't think it ever fades.
No, I don't either. And also, Stan Lee hasn't been involved with regular business in decades. So, he was still around for a long time, in spirit, but he had his own companies and he was doing his own things. And I don't think his influence ever completely goes away. Certainly,
no. Especially if you kind of take the butterfly effect to look at it, where it's like, the writers who were directly influenced by reading his stuff may not be writing so much now, but the people who were influenced by those writers and those artists are certainly still working, and that influence is just going to keep going down the line. It may get further separated, but that influence is still going to be there at some, level.
I also think, and I don't know how many people would agree with this, I also think you could make the argument. I mean, Marvel's publishing so many books and continues to publish, I think, too many books. So there are certainly still a lot of things that come out, especially like tribute things and one-shots and stuff that look very Stan Lee-ish and deliberately kind of go back to that style and try to do, I don't know, try to do kind of not sometimes parody, but sometimes just straight up tribute.
Mm-hmm.
I would make the argument that sometimes the movies feel more Stan Lee inspired than the comics do. And especially when you look at Spider-Man Homecoming and stuff like that, we're always going back to the original mold and then taking inspiration from things that came out later as well. So considering the model that the MCU started with, it never fades there.
Yeah, and you've obviously with Iron Man, you've got a movie that was pretty much made the Marvel method. So just the fact that kind of influences how that first movie in such a successful.
Boy, that's such a great point, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. I don't ever see Stan Lee's influence fading because of how broad his contributions to comics were.
Yeah, and I think it's just so inherent to the spirit of that universe too, that if it feels remotely authentic to what Marvel is, like the moment that there's no Stan Lee influence, it's not Marvel anymore.
Yeah.
Like, there you go.
It's Marvel characters in a unrecognizable universe.
What else do you have?
All right, from Jake Vader, what are your opinions on the elder abuse claims?
Yeah, man, I don't know how much I even want to talk about that. Have you heard about this?
Yeah, I've been following it for, I guess, however long it's been going on. And
so I looked into this a couple days ago. I had not heard about it until he passed. I didn't even know this was going on. Yeah, I looked into it afterwards. And basically, the long and short of it is Stan Lee signed a lengthy document. I watched a video where a guy read a lot of it, so I've seen quite a bit of that document about abuse given to him and his wife by his daughter. By the end, it even got physical. But a lot of it was her spending a lot of his money and not holding a job down on her own and feeling entitled to his wealth and spending more than he told her he could, maxing out credit cards, that kind of thing. Allegedly, she was spending anywhere between $20,000 and $40,000 a month on his dime. And by the end of it, she apparently stormed into his house, and later on he denied all this, which is why I say allegedly. But he did sign it, and it looked like, I mean, his lawyers wrote it, but it looked like it was all his account. So, but anyway, by the end, she stormed into his house, and it got physical, and his wife fell, and he had a minor head injury, and it was awful. It sounds as if, this is just my opinion from everything I've looked at with it, and you can never be totally sure. It sounds like he was maybe coerced by her lawyers or something to deny it. I have a hard time buying that it didn't happen.
I have the same thing, and there's also the issues with the managers who are apparently not like his personal managers, I guess his appearance managers or whatever job title they had, also kind of taking advantage of him, also kind of signing over more than he probably should as far as financial benefits go. And it's McFarlane reached out to him to offer help. Kevin Smith did the same. A couple others did. It seemed like McFarlane in particular was checking up with him regularly.
Oh, that's great.
To keep checking up on, not necessarily doing welfare checks, but just talk with Stan, because obviously those two were very close. Anytime you hear McFarlane talk about it, he has great respect for Stan Lee.
No, they got, well, and it was a mutual respect. They both got along really well. Yeah.
So
that is a big thing I can always say from McFarlane is he treated him really well.
Yeah. And that's hearing some of McFarlane's stuff, because I'd kind of follow his Facebook page because he'll do like live drawings, and it's just always fun to see. And he'd occasionally talk about it, and it was always good to hear like some positive coming out about Stanley's situation at the time, because it's kind of heartbreaking.
Did you see the video? Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was finishing up my thought.
Did you see the video where he where he went on YouTube and said that and denied it and said nobody worry, I'm fine and all of that? It looked really forced. Like it really looked to me like, and I'm not alone on this, but it really looked to me like somebody told him to say that.
No, and that's the impression I got from hearing about the video when it first came out. I didn't want to watch it because
it's heartbreaking.
Heartbreaking. Yeah. And like I don't want anyone who's elderly to be abused by.
It seems like he did that maybe partly just because he didn't want to, have a bad relationship with his daughter. Although they weren't getting along. So like obviously we don't know the details of what got him to say that and to deny the thing he signed. Like he claimed the way he put it, and it sounds. Danny, like again, I saw the video. It sounds ludicrous to me. He's like, "Well, I'm signing things all the time, and somebody just put this in front of me, and I signed it." And I'm like, I don't buy that for a minute.
No, especially something that lengthy, because the statement was a couple pages.
So I'm not saying how dare Stan Lee lie about it. Somebody made him do that. It sounds like. But I mean, I don't know any more than anybody else with just whatever we could glean from the internet. So I could be completely wrong about this, but I don't understand how that statement gets written. Like, why would his lawyers and the people around him like conspire to go against his daughter? Like, I don't understand any of that. It's a sad story, sad state of affairs.
And I think the fact that there were people like McFarlane and like Smith who, even after that happened, were still kind of keeping fans up to date on like, I've checked with Stan Lee and he seems to be doing fine now, kind of adds validity to maybe there was some stuff going on there that wasn't above board, even if
if it was just made up, then why would they feel the need to check up on him? So anyway, but that's my opinion. I tend to think that it really did happen, and it's a crying shame. And it sounds like she was just terrified to be cut off and of what would happen when her parents passed away, and that she, wasn't going to hold a job down on her own and felt entitled to their money. And that's awful. Like, and that's all I've ever heard about her. I don't know anything about her beyond that, except that she tried to have an acting career at one point. It doesn't seem like she really got anywhere. Maybe she was a model for a minute. I'm not even sure.
I don't know much about it.
We're talking about CJ Lee.
Yeah, and I've not looked into her personally because it's just like I don't want to read more about that and get more sad and more upset about a situation that I have no control in. Like,
yeah, absolutely. I wasn't sure if we should even bring it up, but
I wasn't going to. But it was a super chat, and you could kind of hear me hesitate midway through the question, and it was because I realized what the question was. So.
Yeah, and I maybe went on longer than I should have, but I imagine a lot of people didn't know about that, and maybe would want to know. So tried to be as neutral as possible. I don't really know what happened, but just from what little I glean, that's what I imagine, but I don't know because I don't know everything.
All right. So yeah, our next super chat from Jeffrey E. Patron: Stanley's Daredevil on the omnibus would be great, and I agree.
Oh yeah, thanks, man. I'm definitely thinking about doing that. I don't know if I'll get to it this omnibus, but probably at least the one after that. But I'm gonna try because I read that years ago and I just absolutely loved it. Somebody in the comments just asked, what job does Logan have? Well, he's the best he is at what he does, and what he does isn't very nice. What else have you got, Danny?
Our last super chat from Mr. Roboto. Cap,
yeah, thanks, man.
Did you hear a voice? Build it. And did they come?
I did, yeah. And then I made a movie about comic book stores. Danny, are you aware that the Captain Logan show, if you count the 10 or 11 episodes we did, I guess most of those were more me by myself, but called Open Forum, is almost 10 months old?
Is it really?
Yeah. I was going back and I realized we didn't have a playlist for it, so I started archiving it today, and it goes back to February.
Really?
Yeah,
That's crazy because I've pretty much been helping since the first one, helping gather questions. There's not the first one, obviously, but I was watching those early ones, and then you asked me to help, field the questions for you.
I bet some of those early ones are really awkward, where it's just me talking to the camera for an hour. I mean, I really like having Danny here to bounce off of. I don't know. People showed up. They apparently enjoyed it, but I like this a lot better.
Real quick.
Yeah.
David Crabtree says, I wonder if Stan Lee was upset with what happened to the Excelsior in Star Trek 2.
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. Stan Lee for a while there was showing up in every documentary about everything. So there is at least one Star Trek documentary that I know of that Stan Lee's in. And I think he might have known Roddenberry. I'm not sure about that. But he did know something about Star Trek. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if he knows about the Excelsior. The first time I heard the Stan Lee Excelsior thing was after I knew about the Excelsior in Star Trek, and didn't know what that word meant. And then Stan Lee always makes a big deal out of it, where he's like, upward and onward to greater glory. Look at me, I know what this word means. And it is a really cool word, and it's a name for a starship. It
really is. I love that word, Excelsior. It's great.
And it was a really appropriate word for that ship too, because that was a transwarp ship, which was supposed to go faster than warp drive. Transwarp didn't mean back then what it does later, which is you're supposed to be able to be at every point of the universe at the exact same time. I don't think that's what transwarp did back then. But upward and onward to greater glory, and we move faster than we ever have. They were thinking when they came up with that name. But anyway, that's enough about Star Trek. Folks, thanks a lot for watching. Sure appreciate it. This concludes today's live episode of the Captain Logan Show, and that is our tribute to Stan Lee. We're going to talk about quite a bit of stuff related to Stan Lee, and once again, really sad that he has finally passed away, but I'm glad we spent some time talking about him, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. We will see you again next Wednesday at 8 o'clock Central Time for another one. We'll probably do just a regular open forum next time, so come armed with a question about anything that you might want to chat about, and we will see you again then. I am Captain Logan.
And I am Danny. Excelsior, true believers.
See you later, folks.